Hello everybody. If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short story 641, A Cursed Cruise, Homophones 9. Intermediate. The old man, Colonel Alistair Finch, sat in his study, a study that was part museum, part mausoleum. The scent of aged books and pipe tobacco hung in the air. He held a small, tarnished coin, an ancient Roman thing that had been a family heirloom for centuries. It was an insignificant piece of copper, but he valued it greatly. It had a unique story, a provenance lost to time. Just a few weeks ago, he'd received a letter from an old rival, a man who, in a single, well-placed compliment, had turned Alistair's life upside down. He had been a complacent man, a man content to live his life without risk or adventure. However, this rival had exposed an old lie about a piece of land Alistair owned, a small, neglected coign of land in a forgotten part of the country. This land, it turned out, was the site of a legendary Roman encampment, and the man who owned it would, by law, be the sole possessor of any artifacts found there. Now, the old man was no longer complacent, he was driven by a need to protect his family's honor. Alistair looked at the kernel of a plan forming in his mind. He would arrange for a private cruise to the remote area, a small, intimate voyage with a trusted group of archaeologists and specialists. He knew he'd need a large cruise to help with the excavation. He knew he needed the right counsel to make it happen. He contacted a friend, a man named Arthur, who was a retired council member and a master planner. Arthur was known for being a bit of a trickster. Arthur told him to be careful of his second cousin, Bartholomew, who was known to cozen people. Alistair was always a bit wary of him, but he trusted Arthur. He knew Bartholomew was a bit of a scoundrel, but he never thought him capable of outright deceit. He should have listened to Arthur's warnings. The small ship, the Endeavour, sailed through the choppy waters of the English Channel. Alistair stood on the deck, the sea mist a cool spray on his face. The air was heavy with anticipation. The archaeologists were a lively bunch, but they were also driven. The journey was uneventful, but the anticipation of what lay ahead made it feel like a lifetime. After a few days, they reached the secluded creek that led to the forgotten land. The ship's engines made a loud creak as they slowed. They disembarked and set up camp, ready to begin the excavation. The land was overgrown and wild, but they could see the faint traces of the Roman camp. One of the archaeologists, a young woman named Sarah, found a strange stone, a small, polished disc with a single, perfectly formed hole in the center. She held it up to the light, and it shimmered. "It's a talisman," she said, her voice a low, excited coo. "It's a Roman artifact, but not one I've ever seen before." She was a quiet, reserved woman, but her excitement was palpable. Then, a few moments later, they heard a loud bang. A small plane had crashed, the sound echoing through the trees. Alistair looked up, a chill running down his spine. The pilot was a young man, a stranger. He emerged from the wreckage, looking disoriented but unharmed. Then, they heard sirens. "The cops are here," Sarah said, her voice laced with fear. A group of men in a police uniform emerged from the small copse of trees. But they weren't cops. They were Bartholomew's men. He had orchestrated the plane crash, the call to the police, all to get Alistair to give up his claim. It was a perfect coup, a well-planned betrayal. Example, he had been a complacent man, a man content to live his life without risk or adventure. He had no interest in the history, only the profit. But Alistair had a backup plan. He had foreseen this. He had hidden the talisman, and he had a different coin with him, a replica. He had arranged for the real artifact to be sent to a museum. Bartholomew's plan was a failure. Bartholomew was arrested for his crimes. Alistair had won. He looked at the talisman, a small, polished stone with a single, perfectly formed hole in the center. He smiled. He had protected his family's honor, and in doing so, he had found a new purpose. The journey was over, but the adventure had just begun. Vocabulary notes. Provenance. Provenance refers to the origin or source of something, especially a work of art, a historical object, or a piece of property. In the story, the coin's provenance was lost to time, meaning its history and where it came from were unknown. Example, it had a unique story, a provenance lost to time. Similar words, origin, source, history, derivation. Complacent. To be complacent means to be self-satisfied and unworried, often to the point of being unaware of potential dangers or problems. The character Alistair was initially complacent, content with his life until his rival's actions forced him to take action. Example, he had been a complacent man, a man content to live his life without risk or adventure. Similar words, smug, apathetic, unconcerned, self-satisfied. Complaisant. The word complacent describes someone who is willing to please others and is agreeable and submissive. It is often used to describe someone who is overly eager to please or give in to others' wishes. In the story, Alistair's character changes from being easygoing to being more assertive. Example, now, the old man was no longer complacent, he was driven by a need to protect his family's honor. Similar words, agreeable, obliging, cooperative, docile. Scoundrel. A scoundrel is a dishonest or unprincipled person, a rascal. The character Bartholomew is described as a scoundrel, known for his deceitful nature. Example, he knew Bartholomew was a bit of a scoundrel, but he never thought him capable of outright deceit. Similar words, rascal, rogue, villain, knave. Disoriented. To be disoriented means to be confused and out of sorts, having lost one's sense of direction or bearings. The pilot in the story was disoriented after the plane crash, unsure of his surroundings. Example, he emerged from the wreckage, looking disoriented but unharmed. Similar words, confused, bewildered, lost, dazed. Story written by Gemini AI. Image created by Gemini AI. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you.
All right, today we're jumping into a story where just one single misheard word could cost a fortune and maybe even a life. It's a really cool tale about strategy, betrayal, and, believe it or not, the hidden power of language. Wow, what an opening line, right? It just immediately pulls you into the world of Colonel Alistair Finch. You can almost smell the old books and feel the weight of all that history packed into one room. It's the perfect, quiet stage for the absolute chaos that's about to unfold.
So let's meet our main guy, Colonel Finch. He's living this quiet, predictable life, and his most prized possession is this ancient Roman coin. But as you're about to see, that quiet life is going to get very, very loud, all because of this one little object.
Okay, so there's this word, provenance. It's basically the verified history of an object, who's owned it, where it's been. It's like its resume. But the Colonel's coin, it had no provenance, and that made it vulnerable. An old rival jumped on this, claiming the coin was tied to some legendary land, and just like that, the Colonel's entire world was under threat.
Now, before this whole mess started, the Colonel was the very definition of complacent. You know, just totally self-satisfied, not worried about a thing outside his little bubble. He was perfectly happy doing his thing, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing just over the horizon.
But see, that challenge? It completely shattered his complacency. All of a sudden, he was no longer complacent. He wasn't trying to be agreeable or eager to please anymore. No way. With his family's honor on the line, being passive was over. It was time to fight back.
Okay, so with his honor on the line, Colonel Finch switches gears. He goes from being this passive collector to a full-blown strategist. He starts putting a plan together where every single word is going to be absolutely critical.
Now, to get his plan rolling, he didn't form a council, a whole group of people. No, he needed counsel, that's expert advice, from his friend Arthur. And what do you know? Arthur just happened to be a retired council member. Talk about the perfect guy for the job. And his strategy? It was super precise.
First step, get that expert counsel. Second, hire specialized crews to do the digging. Third, set up a secret cruise to get to this remote spot. And the final goal, secure the land and his family's honor.
And get this, the whole thing really depended on two words that sound almost exactly alike. He needed multiple crews with an E, these teams of experts, for the actual dig. And to get them all there, he chartered a private cruise with a UI. But Arthur's advice came with a pretty serious warning. Turns out, the colonel's own cousin, a guy named Bartholomew, was a known scoundrel. Just a dishonest, untrustworthy guy. And this little warning, it was a major hint that the real threat might be a lot closer than the colonel thought.
All right, so here we go. We're at the destination. The plan is in full swing. The team is on the ground. But this is exactly where the story takes a sharp, totally unexpected turn, and it's where words get even more tricky. So, picture this. After days and days at sea, their ship, the Endeavour, finally sails into this hidden creek. The air is just thick with anticipation. They've actually made it to this forgotten piece of land where the treasure might be buried. And right at that moment, as the engines wind down, the ship lets out this long, groaning creak. The end of their long journey is marked by this one single eerie sound. So, you see what happened there, right? In one single moment, their ship sailed into a creek, the waterway, while the ship itself let out a loud creak, the sound. A perfect little confusion of words at a really critical time. And just when they find something amazing, this incredible Roman talisman, bam, disaster strikes. A plane crash just shatters the silence, sending everyone into a panic. Things are about to get really, really complicated.
In all the chaos and confusion, someone sees these men in uniform and just yells the one thing that adds a whole new layer of alarm. The cops are here. It seems like help has arrived, or maybe it's an investigation. But is that what's really happening? I mean, you have to ask, right? In a place this remote, with a priceless artifact just sitting there, what are the odds that their arrival is just a coincidence? Or is this all part of something else?
And of course, they weren't cops at all. They were armed men, and they came out of the copse, that's the small group of trees nearby. It was a terrifying misinterpretation, and these guys were definitely not there to help.
This was the coup. It was Bartholomew's plan from the very beginning. He faked the whole plane crash and hired guys to pretend to be officials so they could snatch the land and the treasure. A brilliant, sudden betrayal designed to catch Alistair completely off guard.
But hold on. Remember how he said the colonel wasn't complacent anymore? He'd sought out counsel for a reason. Bartholomew might have planned a coup, but Alistair, well, he had a secret weapon of his own. Foresight.
See, Alistair was way ahead of him. He totally saw a betrayal coming. So he brought a replica of the coin with him and had already hidden the real artifact somewhere safe. Bartholomew's men grabbed a worthless fake. The whole coup was just a spectacular failure. So when you look back at the whole story, it's pretty amazing, right? The entire plot twists and turns on these little word traps. You've got the colonel's shift from complacent to no longer being complaisant. His need for counsel, not a council. And of course, that huge critical mix-up between cups and cops. Every single pair was a turning point.
And that's it. That's the colonel's story. It's just a powerful reminder that in language, just like in strategy, the smallest details matter the most. A single sound really can change everything. So, I guess the question for you is, which of these words will you be using more carefully from now on?